So everyone, thank you for joining us this evening on behalf of the American Indian Movement of Ohio, the Lake Erie Native American Council, the Ohio Environmental Council, and the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. We are proud to host this panel and support the Cleveland International Film Festival, the 2021 season, and the screening of End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock. We have two amazing ladies who were featured in the film, Pearl Daniel Means and Phyllis Young. And also our director and producer, Shannon Kring. Shannon Kring is an Emmy-winning producer and humanitarian whose work has been presented by dozens of governments and by institutions, including the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, the National Museum of the American Indian, NASA, MIT, and more. She is a UN WTO liaison and serves as Honduras's Goodwill Ambassador. Shannon is also a 2019 Stella Artois Woman in Film Finishing Fund grantee for this film. We also have with us Pearl Daniel Means. She is a producer, activist, and author who speaks around the world on matters concerning Indigenous issues, human rights, and environmentalism. She was born into the Salt Clan of the Navajo Nation, and Pearl walked alongside the late American Indian activist, author, and artist, and actor Russell Means of Cleveland fame as well, as his wife, business manager, and collaborator. She is on the board of directors of Red Nation Film Festival. And we also have joining us Phyllis Young, and she's a founding member of the American Indian Movement and Women of All Red Nations. In her 20s, Phyllis left Standing Rock to fight for Indigenous women within the US Department of State and the UN. She is the leader of the Oceti Sakowin camp, and Phyllis received an award from MIT for her environmental activism. And during her acceptance speech, Phyllis challenged the school's leadership to come to Standing Rock and collaborate on initiatives that will break America's dependence on fossil fuels. MIT broke ground on the Standing Rock MIT Alternative Energy Lab in January 2018. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction. I also want to lay out some rules of engagement really quick. First, a little housekeeping. Please use the chat to speak with the panelists and attendees. You can also use the Q&A feature, which you can find in the bottom right of your Zoom screen, to ask questions directly to the panelists. We have event facilitators here, and they reserve the right to remove an attendee if the attendee is disruptive to the meeting, and or if the attendee uses profanity, discriminatory language, or vulgar references. We take this very seriously. So please keep that in mind as we move forward with this conversation. I do want to do a quick introduction of myself. Ani Dindisikwe Indishnakas, Aji Jacques Ndodum, Waganakasing Odawa and Donjaba. My name is Cynthia Connolly. My Anishinaabe name is Blue Jay Woman. I am a citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians located in northern Michigan. I'm from the Kring clan. I currently live in Cleveland, Ohio. I am on the executive board of the Lake Erie Native American Council, and I work full-time actually at Policy Matters Ohio, which is a nonprofit research institute. I'm here with these wonderful women. I do want to take a minute though, in a little bit of seriousness and sadness. I wanted to send condolences to the family and friends of LaDonna Brave Bull Allard. On Saturday, LaDonna, she was the founder of the Sacred Stone Camp at Standing Rock and featured in this film. She walked on this weekend. LaDonna was an inspiring leader, an unrelenting activist, an elder, and matriarch to us all. So we will continue her fight. I will have our information on how to support her family in this chat. So feel free to check that out if you want to help support her family and friends in this time. If we can have the panelists, I'm gonna get to you. You can introduce yourselves. I do want to start this and kick this off with the film trailer. I realize not everyone may not have seen the film in its entirety at this moment, so I want to take just a couple minutes and kind of set the vibe and the story of our women. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay.
For years, people have fought this struggle, fought for our land and water. And I was at a point where I felt like nobody cared. We're just people from here that stood up and asked everybody to come and stand with us. And they did.
Criminals! By the criminals! The original pipeline was to go through North Dakota, but it was going through white people's land. So they redirected it, put it through the Indians.
What it all comes down to is wanting clean drinking water for our children.
One family. If we don't stand, who will?
And we're peaceful, prayerful people, but it's come to a point now where enough is enough.
Love is the strongest.
The world is run by corporations now. Who's kidding you? Democracy.
Our prayers would not be needed. Indigenous wisdom unheeded and sacred things depleted.
Are you telling the dogs to bite the protesters?
What is the fossil fuel? Continued destruction, nothing new.
I hear the rubber bullet. I see this one just coming straight for my eye.
Taking our children, shifting their feelings till nothing's true.
How many people know that the United States didn't allow us to raise our own families? We won that right in 1985.
They just put the fear in us so bad with hell and with that belt and with abuse. They'd come after you at night and take you someplace and made you do things you didn't want to do, and you thought it was your fault.
So when people ask, why is this the end of the line? Why are women standing up and saying, no, this is it?
Water is life!
It's because they've seen this happen to their children before.
We're disconnected, these times are hectic and feeling.
The earth is not something we pollute, we take advantage of, that we rape. The earth is our mother.
That's why we walk with prayer. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be standing here.
Nobody thought any politician would have the guts. And I just closed my eyes and said, do it.
Have no fear.
We're still going to pursue the legal avenues. I have to leave a footprint.
People, hold your ground. Change is coming now.
The rhetoric is over. It's time for action.
All right. Ooh. Yeah, it's a very powerful trailer, and I actually showed it to my daughters and to our 6 and 7 years old, and it was really powerful to see the reaction and how they take the importance of protecting our earth. So I do want to give a chance for our panelists to kind of say hello and introduce themselves. If we can start with Phyllis.
I extend my hand with a good heart. Mini tekiawi hemachapi na mini yuhanajiwi hemachapi. I'm a woman who stands by the water and woman who loves the water. Those are my given names from my family and my community. So I live on 107 miles of shoreline on Minnesota, the Missouri River. And I thank you for this story. It's hard to remain steadfast and unwavering emotionally because our story is being told. And so I thank this community, particularly because I've been there and done that in Cleveland, Ohio, and survived the relocation and the rehabilitation and the rallying cry of my brother Russell Means to return to our land and our home. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
For those who are unfamiliar, Cleveland is actually one of several select cities in the United States during the 1950s to the 1970s that physically moved Native Americans from reservations into the city. It was a form of assimilation and cultural genocide during termination era policy. And Cleveland, again, was one of those select cities. And so that is one of the reasons why we have, a very sizable urban Native community here today. And so a lot of our community members have come to Cleveland on that program. And I think we're now the 4th generation since that started. Pearl, did you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Yate. Hello, my relatives. My name is Pearl Daniel Means. I come from the Great Navajo Nation. My indigenous name is Ioambia Inajiwe, and that loosely translates as bright light approaching. I had the distinct honor and pleasure to walk at the side of the late Russell Means, and his life was multifaceted. There were never 2 days alike, and it was most important. It was exciting. It was fun. It was dangerous. It was all of that. And Cleveland is where he got his start. He went out on the relocation program in the late 60s, and he founded the American Indian Cleveland Center. And it was while he was working there that he attended a conference in San Francisco where he met Dennis Banks and Clyde Bellacourt. And they gave him a little handbook, Brothers Keepers. And he read that and he said, "How do I join?" And Dennis said, "You just did." So the rest is history.
Thanks, Pearl. Shannon?
I'm Shannon Kring. I am honored to have produced and directed this film alongside Pearl. And I'm just really thrilled that your community has embraced our project as much as you have. Thank you for having us.
All right. Yes, and thank you all 3 of you for taking some time out of your day, especially considering the news from this weekend with LaDonna. We're very grateful and honored to share this space with you today. To kind of start the Q&A, I guess my first question is how this whole film came to be. I know that, we have footage from the very beginning of these days, of these times. How did that come to be? Who approached who? Was this something that Shannon approached you about? And were you hesitant to agree to allow cameras into this almost, sacred, just historical moment? And did you realize it was a historical moment at that time? Anyone can take this one.
Well, I can explain that. I felt called to go. I was living in Honduras covering a horrible story there of human rights abuses of the indigenous people there. And my family was sending me links of LaDonna, especially features on Democracy Now! And I just felt like, hey, I've been out of the country for a few years now. It's time to go back to the US and cover these stories there. And so I contacted Pearl right away. And Pearl, you can take it from there.
Well, I think the late Russell Means was behind all of this. This was late August, and I live in northern New Mexico. We have beautiful summers, afternoon showers. It's just really a nice place to be during the summer months. And every day I said to myself, I need to call my sister Phyllis and see what's happening. What can I do? And I was just kind of thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And so I had finally, this will take a minute, but it's worth the story. I have my office in my guest house, and I walked in there about noon on a Wednesday, and I sat down at the computer and I started working. It was about 10-15 minutes later, and I felt this unfathomable shock, electrical shock, that just hit me right in my stomach area, threw me out of my chair, and I realized I had been hit by lightning. So I walked out. I could smell the that pungent odor of sulfur, and it kind of smelled like wires burning. So I looked around, made certain nothing was on fire. I came in the main house and drank a glass of water. And I just kept thinking, but I'm fine. My hands, my feet, I'm really fine. So I called my little sister, who's a nurse, told her what had happened. She suggested I go in and get checked out. And I said, but I'm fine. I feel fine. So that evening, still pondering all of this, I came to the realization that that was Russell getting my attention to get up to Standing Rock. And as he often said to us, the camera is the weapon of the 21st century. So the next day, Shannon called me from Honduras and said, "Are you at Standing Rock?" And I said, "No, I'm leaving on Saturday." And I told her what had happened. And she's agreed that that was probably Russell getting my attention. And we arranged to meet there at Standing Rock on Sunday. And I just started lining up interviews. And of course, I reached out to Phyllis. And of course, Phyllis was she was in the hot seat. It was happening, and it was happening very quickly. And I said to her, I said, "Phyllis, I hate to do this, but your brother Russ often said that we have to document our own history. Otherwise, they'll change it. We have over a century of that." So she reluctantly agreed, and we were off and going with the interviews.
Okay.
And in case the audience isn't familiar with, Russell often said that he was coming back as lightning. So that's kind of the driving force there.
And I was having a lot of dreams about him. Every time I would go to sleep, it seemed all of a sudden he was there. And one of the first things that was said to me when I got out at Standing Rock, Madonna Thunderhawk said, "Did Russell contact you as well?" And I said, "Yes, he did." I believe so. So a long but interesting story of how all of this came to be.
Phyllis, did you want to chime in there?
So this was an interval because we had LaDonna, bless her spirit today, in a new realm. She was in the front lines for many years since 2007, when Standing Rock declared that there would be no pipelines that would go through Standing Rock. But she was a graduate of the University of North Dakota in history, and she came home with that credential. She became the tribal historian for the tribe. She became the genealogist for the tribe, and she came as a frontliner on water rights. So I was moved by her plan to create a camp at Sacred Stone. It's called Sacred Stone because there was a large stone there with petroglyphs there, and in wonderment and awe, we prayed at that stone. We have since moved it and put it in protection. So she was on the ground, on the land, on the water. She was with Mother Earth from day one. That was also her academic goal. So having had a camp before on the South Dakota side, Mad Bear's Camp. We had federal recognition for 18 sacred sites on Standing Rock, and LaDonna was in charge of those. And she did that with great respect and dignity, acknowledging the gifts that Creator had given us. And so this was an interval where she felt action had to be taken, and she created that second camp, knowing that that tradition could not be lightly addressed by the government and the Army Corps of Engineers. So on April 1st, 2016, she mobilized the people to go into where her land was along the Cannonball River at the mouth of the Missouri River. And she reminded me of her great aunt who called the American Indian movement in 1975. I was the messenger, Russell Means was the messenger, and 17 carloads came from everywhere, and they answered the call of Annie Thunderhawk. And she wanted a pipe ceremony because we had been at the tail end of the prohibition of our religious rights, including the pipe. So that was in 1975. Congress passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act in 1978. So what we were doing were defying the policies of the government of prohibition of our spirituality. So Annie was the sister of LaDonna's father. And she reminded me that day, a very emotional day, April 1st, because I said the last time I came in an entourage was in 1975 when the AIM, American Indian Movement, came. They facilitated the pipe ceremony in defiance, and Annie wanted it in her language, in Lakota. So the beauty for me, the American Indian Movement, was to enact our language in the most sacred rite of the pipe ceremony. So that was done by the American Indian Movement in the most beautiful way and peaceful way, according to Annie Thunderhawk, the matriarch, in 1975. So fast forward, we are marching. Children are riding bicycles. Everyone's riding horse. They're walking, they're running, they're going in to have the prayer ceremony to open the camp. And it was sacred stone, a sacred site, one of 18. So, and then to have 200 or 300 cars, I called them horses that day. And it was very emotional because I said the last time I came to Cannonball was in an entourage with Russell Means and all of the American Indian Movement, so we could have prayer. And so the lineage and the legacy and the legend carries on for LaDonna, who honed her horns academically, socially, spiritually, and led the charge to create that camp. It was created in April 1st. We didn't ever envision that there would be ultimately 13,000 people that would come and that we would have to make accommodation by expansion. And so my duty was to create the Ocheti Shakoi camp, which means all the council fires of our people.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis. 13,000 people. That is a lot. I knew there was a lot, but when you say it that way, it just really shows the gravity and the importance of this moment. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the tactics that the opposition did. Right, we saw in the film the helicopters flying, that yellow helicopter. We saw them bringing in the National Guard. Here in Ohio, actually, we found out that they were sending state troopers to the camps, and as well as the dog handler that we see, the famous one from the Democracy Now! Footage biting our water protectors. That was actually a dog handler from Ohio. So we're seeing kind of a lot of these infiltration of other areas coming into Standing Rock, but yet their main tactic was to paint this, the opposition's main tactic was to paint this as, outsiders, nothing more than violent out-of-state people, even though this was started and founded and, really just internalized by our indigenous people in that area. Can you talk about how you fought back against that narrative and made sure that it didn't stick, and how this film kind of highlights the importance of women and our people in this movement?
Phyllis, want to answer that?
So we, being mindful of our status and the traditional thought process that we have held within us for thousands of years, was still part of our DNA and still part of the strategy that we knew that we had to move forward. And I understood my brother Russell Means's temperament in his elder years, because he acknowledged the women. We didn't relate to matriarchy in the English sense, but we have Wope, and Wope is the spiritual. So we were into a very spiritual movement opposed to state law. And so Red Fawn and several of us women, very early on, the perimeters were different from April to August. We were up farther north in treaty territory, and our front lines were right on the gates, the two gates of the proposed pipeline. And even the dynamics were different, because the rancher who had purchased that Cannibal Ranch land was in fact, wanted us to be a partner. And so we strategically mapped out the area to where our parking would be, our camping would be, and our whole taking space on the land. So it was very different from April to August, where we were security. But when that happened, we were shocked and amazed that Morton County Police came and began lining up to stand in front of us. And Red Fawn was the first person to be arrested, and being a woman, and the second was a woman veteran, Purple Heart recipient, and she was, and I was there, and all we did in Red Fawn sang in Lakota language and had her regalia on, and just stood, and they created a line, and you could see the fear from day one in their eyes, that they didn't understand what we were doing or what we represented, and that we were women. So the presence of women was first and primary, but we were identifying with Wo Dakota. And Dakota means friend or ally in our language. And put a W-O in front of it, Wo Dakota, Wo Lakota, means peace. We have very spiritual language. So the presence, the mindset, and the spiritual connection that we had as women was what we put forward, and acknowledging Wope and moving forward in a spiritual sense. So sacred, the sacred land, the sacred water, the sacredness of women. And so who we represented and what we represented that day began immediately after it had the encampment. The Martin County Police were the front line. That power and authority, police power, was delegated to them by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You cannot delegate a treaty right.
Shannon, did you want to chime in there?
It was shocking to witness everything that was happening. I can tell you that the same techniques, the intimidation techniques and such, of course, they were targeting filmmakers. And from the beginning, the very first video that I had posted, because this was a crowd-funded film, made possible by about 1,700 crowdfunders in 40 plus countries. And the first video, there were almost 18,000 negative comments on it. And I started then receiving death threats and all kinds of threats, which I expected. That tells me I'm doing my job well, actually, in the type of work that I do. And then, of course, out at camp, I was actually lucky. I was interrogated, but I didn't have any footage seized. I was really careful, just having worked in environments such as this before. We would drive an hour and a half most days to send hard drives of our footage to various locations across the US, knowing that they were seizing not only footage, but actually breaking cameras. They broke the wrist of one of the filmmakers out there. And so a lot of people didn't want this story to be told and still don't. And that's why we're especially grateful that now it's still a grassroots promotion that we've got with film festivals and people such as yourselves that are getting the word out. I want everyone to see this and to see the grievous actions that were taken against peaceful protesters.
Yeah, this is without a doubt one of the most fierce fights that we've seen for our people, and controversial, right? From the polarizing sides of the political spectrum, and the threats that our water protectors have faced. Absolutely. And to hear that it was, the filmmakers facing this as well. I mean, we've seen as, the media be targeted in the footage that we've seen. So that's a really important thing in perspective to bring out there. I do want to remind everyone that you can submit a question through the Q&A feature, bottom right of your Zoom screen. Just go ahead and click on that and you can send a question to our panelists, and then also through the chat feature as well. I actually have my next question kind of runs into one of the things that was said in the very beginning of the film. And she said, it was a quote saying that they're living our sovereignty. And to me, that's really, really strong. And I feel this is a movement that a lot of people are pushing with environmental issues, our food sovereignty. It's just really taken over and resonated with a lot of people. And I'm just curious, what does living our sovereignty mean to you, as we look at this film, this event that we all went through? Phyllis, Pearl, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. I don't know if you want to chime in here.
Sure. Again, reflecting on Russell's words, because Russell Means and sovereignty was synonymous. And his position was, if you want to be sovereign, act sovereign. And that's exactly what our women did, is we took a stand, and it was based on our responsibility as givers of life. Water is very sacred. It's something that the outside world doesn't recognize with Indigenous peoples, is that we come from matrilineal social systems. And it's not that the women control, it's that we operate fully within our power. And as we mature, and in the Western societies, we become throwaways after menopause. Whereas in indigenous societies, we become matriarchs. We step into our full responsibility. And so this movie, this documentary, really exemplifies the role of the female in our indigenous societies. And another thing Russell often said was that the invader attacked, not knowing this, they attacked our men, not knowing that the survival lies with the female. And that's why we're still here today.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed throughout the movement, and I noticed in the film as well, and it was actually highlighted, a lot of the conversation happened around the creation of our ribbon skirts. A lot of the women wore ribbon skirts. I know that here in Cleveland, that's one of the sessions that we host for our community about, the lessons and teachings behind ribbon skirts and wearing them and how you wear them. So if kind of pivoting a little bit, kind of talking about why women were wearing ribbon skirts, the reasoning behind that. And then also there's a question that kind of ties in with this. So again, hitting you with a two for one, how the women, how their activism differed from the men's, and did it?
Well, I think as women, we recognize that we are the givers of life. And water is sacred from the womb to, the entire birthing process, and it's essential for all of life. So we understand that principle, that nothing positive is done with aggression. We have a spiritual essence that is embedded in our DNA. So when we move forward with our spiritual essence. And that can, well, and again, I'll defer back to something Russell again said, was during the heady days of the 60s and 70s, the liberation movements, the Black Panther, the Brown Beret, the Puerto Rican young lords, et cetera, they all came and went, where the American Indian movement stayed. The movement was the vanguard, but it went out into the communities. And today we still have the American Indian movement because it was based in spiritual principles. So we, as women, we know that that is where our power is. We have a power that our male counterparts don't have in the same way that we do. And so when we stand within our power, it's very powerful. And this is what our documentary documents.
I just want to add that, as a young American, I was part of the dress up generation. And so back in the 70s, we made our own ribbon shirts and our own attire. And so likewise, we made reference to the stones, the sacred stones, the petroglyphs. And so we created the necklace, which represented the bones, the backbone of women, and what those sacred stones are laid out on Mother Earth like it. And half of that made that large, big breastplate bone structure, half of it is gone. So that tells us that we have to rid the toxic from our environment and our lives, and that necklace we created represents the backbone of our people, of women. So that attire for that breastbone plate that we created with that shell, which is feminine, represents we're taking back the backbone, and we're going to change the world by teaching our children, which we have historically always done, carried forward what we've lost and tried to regain and take back, like we did by creating the Women of All Red Nations in 1978, taking back our children, taking back our language, taking back our culture. And so this ribbon skirt represents your ownership of your home. The teepee has 12 poles. One is the morning star, one is the evening star. So you have a time and a space to pray and what you pray for. And every one of those poles represents a virtue and a part of our belief system. And the pole that holds the door is the main pole, and it goes up. You could see as you can roll it. That is what you dress. That she is the fashion pole. So she is covered with ribbons. And so that skirt represents that fashion attire, but it also tells the world that we have a home to take care of based on prayer, and we have a family, Tiwahe, first. So there's strong messages in the attire and the fashionista that we are. We love it. So that's what those represent to us. And when you have Fifth Avenue calling you and they want to make ribbon skirts, and if they have permission, yes, we are Lakota. We are universal people of pluralistic society, and we missionize like no one else. So they know who we are, and we will promote what we think is most sacred at this new threshold for humanity.
Sure, I bust up earrings for this occasion, the biggest earrings that I have. Yeah, I want to take a question really quick from one of our audience members before moving into the next question that I personally had was, how many is from Kimberly? How many Native American nations participated, and what impact did this action have on the larger relations of Indigenous people? Pearl, I don't know, or if you wanted to take that one, but Shannon?
Phyllis is best to answer that.
We'll defer to Phyllis.
There were over 416 Indigenous nations that attended. We have the majority of the flags that were on Flag Boulevard and were put up there. 30 countries and Indigenous people from all over the world. And so here in the United States, it was incredible. And every nation that came brought their secrets and their mysteries to begin the power that we needed to embrace. So what we did was acknowledge those moving ones were from Mexico that brought fruit and baskets. And I'm speechless, and I'm the most rhetorical person in the world. And the Crow Nation, when they came, the tribal chairman and I were standing there and looking, and tears falling down our faces. And he looked at me and he said, "Tears of joy, right?" And I said, "Yes." So have Crow Nation come in full regalia and headdresses and fully dressed in all their regalia, having a whole contingent of men leading, and then having their women all in beautiful shell dresses, and then to have buffalo meat that was butchered and brought as gift for food. Very historical for the misquote in history that they were our greatest enemies when they were not. And so casting aside that history that was always preached to us, we witnessed the beauty of the Crow Nation and the language holders they are, the beautiful nation of people that they came with gifts and sacred songs and prayer, and we welcomed them into the camp. So there were countless welcomes that we did, and we tried to be there for every one of them. We didn't know that there would be 416 indigenous nations to welcome. And then to have 30 nations and putting their flags up. And so it was incredible. We never envisioned the capacity of people and nations and indigenous people to come. The children, I was given a gift for, my daughter brought a dress from Hawaii for me. And I had it on one day, and this little girl came running up to me and she said, "Are you from Hawaii?" "I'm from Hawaii." "Are you, that dress is from Hawaii?" And I was like, "Oh, bless you, bless you. You know your regalia, your dress from your town." Just so many moving, emotional, touches your spirit to know how many people came, indigenous people. It was incredible from the entire world, from North America to the tip of South America, they came.
Yeah, 416 tribes. For context, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. That's not including Native Hawaiian nations, Central and South America, or our First Nations in Canada. So 574, there's 416 tribes. I know my tribe was one of them. I remember one of my cousins brought our flag, the little Traverse Bay Odawa flag, over to Standing Rock, and that was like a really proud moment for our tribe to represent and be there in solidarity. The next question I have is a little bit towards Shannon, but Pearl and Phyllis absolutely chime in here. In the film, you covered not only the injustices of the pipeline and treaty violations, but also generational trauma, boarding schools, residential schools. Can you explain why you felt that was important to include in this film? We're talking about pipelines and treaties and bringing in that context of generational trauma.
Well, a lot of people that I encountered, especially in the early days of the making of this film, said a lot of horrible things. Among them, these are things that happened a long time ago. They need to get over it. And I grew up being taught what was happening in the present day and what had happened in recent history. And so I knew, but I can tell you our crew, for instance, our production crew, they had no idea that there was forced sterilization. They didn't know anything about the boarding school atrocities or that there were foster care abuses, etc. And I felt it was really important in this film to ground the current Standing Rock events with the historical context that shows why it came to this point of why enough is enough. I also feel as if it's impossible to fully have any sort of hope for reconciliation, if there is any hope of that, between white people and the indigenous people of this world, if we don't admit what happens, if we don't talk about it, if we don't try at least to make some sort of amends. And so it was really important for me to show that. And I wish we could have included more of it in the film. When you're given 87 minutes to tell a huge story such as this, you really have to, choose your battles, so to speak. But it was really important for me to include this. And I actually got fought by people who were working with us saying, you can't include all of that. This is the story of Standing Rock. And I thought to myself, this is the story of Standing Rock. And sadly, it's the story of indigenous people the world over. The struggle for identity is happening all over the world. And so for me, it was crucial. I was not about to tell this story if we didn't tell it in its full context.
It was also an educational opportunity to Standing Rock was the contemporary issue that brought us as Indigenous peoples to the forefront once again. But it was very, very important to me that we take this opportunity to educate as much as possible the public at large as to the atrocities that were first bred and born in Indian country, exported to the world. Now it's back on the American people. And that's a quote from Russell Means. Whether it's their policies or, education, housing, government, you name it, social ills, it was first perfected on us as Indigenous peoples. So Shannon and I both really felt strongly that we needed to introduce this because there's so much that is not understood about the Indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. So and the editor wove it in very nicely. We weren't sure how it was going to all fit, but we knew these were important things. And again, women, we were in the forefront of a lot of those atrocities. So I'm very grateful to our editors and to Shannon for weaving it in so powerfully.
It also shows the resilience. I think that, Standing Rock in itself was so impressive, how Phyllis and others who were in a leadership position just seemed to get stronger the more opposition that came their way. But to see that they've been fighting this in some cases 40, 50 years, that to me made it all the more impressive that they were still out at Standing Rock. Elderly people, there were women out there that I interviewed in their mid to late 80s, but also young girls, 6, 7 years old. And it was just so powerful to see the resilience. And I think that the entire world can learn from them because there's so much ugliness today that always existed, but now we see it because of social media largely. To see examples of people who dare to take a stand and inspire everyone, I think that's really important.
And there was a lot of healing. And I think Phyllis can speak to that. It was very powerful with the churches and the military. It was a beautiful, beautiful time. And we were all touched on one level or another, but the healing that took place was incredible.
Yeah, I know Phyllis, go ahead.
So I want to give Ohio a little history lesson. The Lakotas, we have 33 treaties with the United States. And the first treaty is at Port Sandusky, Ohio, with Zebulon Pike in 1805. And the doctrine of discovery, which is too large to talk about here, but the doctrine of discovery defines the Indian people as 1/3 animal and 2/3 human being, and the blacks, I think it's 3/5 human and 2/5 animal. And that papal bull validates their right to take our land because we are heathens and not Christians. And so that is a major institutional change we need to make. But it wasn't until that first treaty in Ohio that Isaac Stevens wrote into that that we were part animal. So it began in 1805. but we have that treaty. All of those 33 treaties have been validated by the UN study in Geneva, which was 15 years. And so primarily my work for 20 years at the UN. And so I'm going to post to a Lakota man in Ohio to post that one in Wisconsin with Enbridge. Each pipeline knows that there's a treaty, or they should know that those are validated by the Vienna Convention 62. So we have ratified those under international law, and we move forward with that. So Ohio was the birthing grounds of the treaty status, and we are holding them to the United States to upholding those agreements at that level. So I just wanted to get a point of history in there for the state of Ohio. Well, thank you.
As goes Ohio, as they say. So cognizant of time, I do want to bring in this last question and also highlight some other fights that are going on in addition to Standing Rock. Right now, my own tribe and many other tribes in Michigan are currently taking on Enbridge Line 5, which is a line that goes directly through the Straits of Mackinac, and it's between the North and South, the North and Lower Peninsula, North and South Peninsula. And so Enbridge Line 5 is a fight that's currently happening, as well as Enbridge Line 3, which I believe is in Minnesota. So again, the work continues, the fight continues. There's more information that if you check the chat box, we can send you some information there. And a couple questions that we've got is wondering what's the status now, what's happening now, and how things are going to go in the future, especially with this new administration.
We just had a hearing on April 9th, and the judge, it's almost like everyone doesn't want to do it. The judge has ruled that the permits are illegal. There are no permits for the DAPL. And so on the 19th, he gave additional time for DAPL to come up with something. And so in the meantime, we have filed 10 lawsuits on December of 2018 for the return of the land, for every issue, for the mineral rights, for the riverbed, for the hydropower. They're in there, and Trump ignored them, which was the dialogue, the dispute resolution, and the initial lawsuit that we have to exhaust those procedures before we file a lawsuit. So we're refiling that under the new secretary, and we realize that she doesn't have the full authority over Indian people. So, but we have filed extensive, America doesn't have the money in their treasury to repay us or repatriate, but we are going forward on the process of the treaty and beginning the repatriation figures, 20,000 per person for healthcare back to 1848, 20,000 per prisoner taken illegally to the states and counties, including the 850 from No DAPL. So 20,000 because that's a standard they used for the Japanese internment. So we are doing repatriation. We are waiting for this lawsuit to stop the pipeline. We were scheduled to have a congressional hearing last Earth Day, April 22nd in 2020. We were scheduled to testify in court. I was to be a witness. I was to be one of the witnesses in the congressional hearing as well. And that didn't happen because of COVID. So COVID has been a deterrent for us. And so I'm blessed that my immediate family, my Tiwahe, have recovered. and from the COVID, including my 5-year-old granddaughter, my 14-year-old grandson, and my daughter. So I'm grateful. We lost family members, my sister-in-law, many members in our community, and people in indigenous in the world. So we all had to deal with that, but it stopped. Everyone's space and time. So we have time to appreciate living and breathing. So we go forward legislatively. I'm hoping, Pearl, that we're moving forward with the creation of an indigenous court system. And I have hope on that. Red Fawn has come home from prison after 4.5 years. She's very happy. And last, I want to give my my prayerful thanks to all who support LaDonna and give her a good journey to meet her loved ones. So I thank you for this. Cleveland, Ohio was special. We did some good humanitarian things. We mobilized under Russell Means' directorship, Trail of Broken Treaties. Russ and I both got fired from our jobs in Cleveland, so we pay a price, but it's a beautiful journey that we were on, and our labor came in life experience, and we continued after that. We went home, and we made history all along. So I appreciate the good things that I had in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a spoiled American. I've met the best diplomats in the world, and I'm spoiled good. So I will use the best of principles in democracy to move forward. So I thank Cleveland, Ohio. Popula. Thank you to Shannon and Pearl. I love you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I love you too.
All right. You know, we're a bit over time. I'm so grateful to have this amazing conversation. It looks like we have a few other questions that are in the queue here. So I'll, feel free to send those questions to LENAC Ohio. If you have any additional comments or questions, please, again, email lenacohio@gmail.com, and we can see if we can get some answers for you. I'm so grateful. I was looking forward to this all day, all week, utterly moved by the documentary and the need to elevate this issue, and specifically the fights of Indigenous people in general, how this movement changed the way that we're heard and seen and looked at as modern, real people with legitimate, concerns for our people, our families, our communities, our youth, our children. And so please, continue to do this important work that you're doing. There's so much more work yet to be done. I know here in Cleveland, we've been fighting very hard for visibility and representation with the mascot issue as well. And if you're looking to support the local Native community, you can visit us on Facebook, LENAC Ohio. Any contributions you give to us today will help us continue that work. We also have some links in the chat box to the other partnering organizations and how you can support their important work and their 501c3 organizations. And I guess as a last kind of final statement, as we conclude here, what is, in one sentence or less, what does it mean to be an Indigenous woman, or what would you like the world to know about Indigenous women? I'll start with Shannon.
Oh, well, I can't speak to being an Indigenous woman, but I can speak to being someone who was raised without the values and the appreciation that Indigenous people inherently have. And I wish the world would, especially now when we've pushed the earth to the ultimate limits with regard to mistreatment, I wish that people would wake up and listen to our Indigenous brothers and sisters and the wisdom that they have. I know that there's a lot of appropriation happening, for instance, in fashion, as we touched on earlier, traditions, etc. I'm not so sure it's always rooted in ill will. I think that white Western people are so lacking in these connections to the earth and to one another that they're seeking something greater than themselves. And so I would urge people to watch documentaries, read books, and especially listen to elders and others who are giving voice to their ways, and have some respect.
Phyllis, what would you like the world to know about Indigenous women?
That we have beautiful secrets, beautiful mysteries within our languages, within our societies, that we are still existing according to those societies. We have a lot to offer in terms of our belief systems. We have value systems that were prohibited for 60 years from 1910 to 1978. Those were locked in and locked out. We have a lot to offer, so we're creating hard drives so that we can take them into our villages, into our 5-year-olds know how to do these computers. And so taking it from the nest with our languages and the beauty of our culture. We are the most beautiful people in the world. We are natural people, so we come from Mother Earth. We all come from water. We're born in water. So we have infinite hope to continue the circle and know our people have only a beginning. We have no end. So we go forward. So Mitaki Ase, all my relatives.
Pearl?
Well, we follow the clan of our mother. And because we have very distinctive roles, gender roles, it's not a bad word in our society. That's how we maintain our balance. And we can therefore celebrate our differences. So as women, we operate fully within our power. We don't try to emulate, we don't try to compete with our male counterpart. So we're very secure in who we are, what we are, and why we are.
Perfect, just perfect. And to conclude, I mean, I can't end it any better than that. That's amazing. I do have in the chat box links to the film. Please make sure to check it out if you have not already. You can use one of those 4 discount codes to receive $1 off your ticket. You can stream it anytime during the length of the film festival. So please make sure to check out the film. And again, Chi Miigwech, thank you very much to all of our panelists, to Shannon and Pearl and Phyllis for joining us today. And again, thank you to our partners, the American Indian Movement of Ohio, the Ohio Environmental Council, the League of Women Voters of Cleveland, and I am with the Lake Erie Native American Council. And we're just so pleased and so excited to host you all today for the film End of the Line, Women of Standing Rock. Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you.
Thank you.